expecting some questions from the journalists who've gathered to listen to what Dame Janet Smith, who is a former High Court judge, by the way, which perhaps begins to account for her stylistic approach to some of the questions she was addressing there. She was listing some of the senior managers who could have intervened at various junctures. Some of whom, of course, are no longer with us, others who simply missed opportunities.
3 managers at the BBC she named, and 2 up in Manchester in relation to other abuse allegations about Stuart Hall, and also ending her speech there with a personal message to the victims, reiterating that they are not to blame, and that the legacy of this has to be that the young and vulnerable need to be listened to. Let's listen, though, now to the questions that are coming from the floor.
From BBC News.
Yes.
You say in your report that 117 people at the BBC heard rumours or stories about Jimmy Savile's sexual conduct, including some senior people. Yet you say that no senior managers knew what Savile was up to. Isn't this, as some of the victims think, a whitewash?
It certainly isn't a whitewash. It's right that 117 witnesses told the Review that they had heard rumours about Jimmy Savile. As a matter of fact, 180 witnesses, rather more than the 117, told me that they had not. But you see, I did find that a number of people at the BBC, junior people, did know about Savile. Either they knew from what they saw, or they realised and drew inferences in their own minds, and they realised what he was doing. They didn't report these matters upwards, and that I attribute to the culture of the BBC. I found that 2 people of producer level also knew, and I've mentioned their names in my opening remarks. They didn't report upwards either. I don't think that the fact that a producer knew about Savile means that the BBC as a corporate body knew. I had to make a judgment about what level of BBC management can be equated with the BBC as an organisation. And I came to the conclusion, as I explain in my report, that that level should be pitched at head of department level. I did consider whether it should be pitched at producer level, and I came to the conclusion that it should not, for reasons that I explain. To go back to the rumours, I'm a judge, or I was, and I still think like a judge, and I have to reach conclusions based on evidence that I hear. Rumour is not evidence. I have to have evidence. Somebody switched their phone off. I have to have evidence, either direct evidence or circumstantial evidence from which I can sensibly and properly draw an inference. I can't do that from rumours. True, there were lots of people who heard rumours. Many of them heard rumours about a lot of other people as well. You may know, some of you, my questioner may know, that the BBC is something of a rumour mill. There are rumours about all sorts of people. I simply could not properly draw the inference from the fact that some people had heard rumours that senior managers had. I've explained already that the BBC was a hierarchical organisation and a deferential one. The fact that people heard rumours in the canteens does not mean that people in management circles knew. I cannot draw that inference, and I will not do so. It would be quite wrong. Yes, you were next.
Right. Sir, David Henke from XRO News.
Yes.
I know the website you referred to.
Website.
That leaked the report. Two questions. One,
no, you're only allowed one and a supplementary. I should have made that plain. Choose your best.
Choose my best. Right. Why did you, or do you regret in hindsight, the fact you gave away half your terms of reference to look at child protection, obviously because you thought the report was going to come out earlier, and I was also, dare I add, Are you satisfied as well as a judge who couldn't compel people to give evidence?
No, you're going on to two.
Right.
You're eliding two questions. Do I regret giving away, as you call it, part of my terms of reference? The BBC told me that they had realised that their policies needed updating, and they wanted to get on with that work. They got on with it. They then wanted to have somebody look at those new policies, criticise them, give advice about them, sooner than I was going to be able to do it. I agreed that that was a perfectly sensible thing for them to do, and no, I don't regret having given that material away. The Good Corporation was able to report much more quickly than I would have been able to in the event last July. That has been useful to the BBC because they've been able to get on with putting into effect the Good Corporation's recommendations. And I'm sure that Lord Hall will have something to say about that later this morning. No, I don't regret it. I think it was a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do. Yes, I should have chosen. I'll choose you now, and I'll choose you with the pencil in your hand as the next one along. Yes.
Sorry, forgive me. I'm juggling some material that I need to read out. So forgive me for that. Neil Midgley, commentator for the Daily Telegraph. One of the questions that you considered both in the leaked draft and in the final report was whether a predatory child abuser could be lurking undiscovered in the BBC today. But you used two different wordings in your answer. In the draft, you said, the answer is that I think that it is possible. And in the final report, you said, my answer is that I do not think there is any organisation that can be completely confident that it does not harbour a child abuser. So my question is, that those are two very different conclusions. One is a conclusion specifically about the BBC, which has been very widely reported. The other is a broad statistical point. And I wonder what evidence and on whose representations you changed your conclusion.
First of all, I received no representations at all in relation to that part of my report. Second, you have quoted from the leaked version a single sentence. If you quoted, and I'd like you to do so if you have it in front of you, if you quote the whole paragraph, you will see that the sense of what I say has not changed. Read it out, will you?
Would you like me to read it out?
Yes.
So the answer is that I think it is possible. It must be recognised that child sex abusers can be highly intelligent, articulate and charismatic but manipulative people. Stuart Hall is an example, so it seems is Rolf Harris. Savile was intelligent, charismatic and extremely manipulative, if not always very articulate. Coupled with celebrity, the power of which shows no sign of diminishing in our society, those features make a powerful combination, which makes detection difficult. Until a complaint is made, such people are likely to enjoy the confidence and approval of all those around them.
So what I'm saying there, is it not, that it's extremely difficult to detect a child abuser in an organisation? The only change is that I have pointed out more clearly, as warning to the rest of society, that any organisation might be harbouring a child abuser and they don't realise it and they need to be on their guard.
But this has been, my supplementary is, this has been a very widely reported, very sensational conclusion.
I'm not responsible for that.
Well, what you are responsible for, as you said to the previous questioner, is that you make conclusions only on the basis of evidence.
I do.
And I wonder what the evidence was that you used to make that specific conclusion about the BBC in your draft report.
The specific conclusion in my draft report is that the BBC might have. I didn't say that they had. What I was seeking to point out is that no organisation can ever know. This is a really good example of the irresponsibility of a website publishing a report at a time when it has no business to do so, I was entitled to reread that passage of my report and amend it. And I did so. And nobody put me under any pressure to do so. I did so because I thought I could express it more clearly. That is the answer. Yes.
Hello.
Wait a minute. Who was next? Who did I promise?
It was me.
Right.
And I have a
promised you,
microphone. Hi.
and then you afterwards. All right.
Catherine Rushton from the Daily Mail. Did you speak to Mark Thompson as a witness at any point during your inquiries? And if not, why not?
I did.
Excellent. Is he? I haven't found that page yet. Is he named in the report?
Yes, I think so. I certainly. There is not a great deal to report about him, but I did speak to him. Yes, I think you'll find a passage about him in chapter 10, I think.
Thank you.
Don't hold me to that, but he's there. Yes, now who is next? You were. Have you got the microphone? You haven't yet. And after that, white shirt, there.
Thank you.
I'll come to you, I promise you next.
Dame Janet, Pete Saunders from NAPAC, supporting survivors of abuse.
Yes.
To help you out with the previous question, what you said about the likelihood of an abuser lurking within the BBC, I think was an entirely appropriate thing to say, because not only is there almost inevitably going to be other abusers within the BBC, there are, as you indicate, abusers in every organisation, large and small. That is a statistical reality that we have to grasp with. But my question
yes.
was to, well, initially to thank you for acknowledging the contribution of survivors of Savile and Hall, and having spoken to one or two of them in recent days, they've been dreading this day, as you can appreciate. So thank you for thanking them in the appropriate way.
It comes from the heart. I hope
did.
You can see that.
I can see that most clearly, Dame Janet. But the question is,
yes.
Are you satisfied that those victim survivors that have come forward are now receiving the appropriate and proper support that they need in order to move on with their lives? Because again, at NAPAC, we are still hearing from many survivors, including some of Savile's victims, that they are still not able to make progress in their life. Because unlike myself, who can afford my weekly therapy session, I know that there are many victims and survivors out there who simply cannot afford to have private therapy, and it's time that the NHS were brought into this equation in order to help
yes.
the many survivors.
Yes.
Sorry to go on.
Well, it's really very difficult for me to answer this question because I don't have any resources to dispose of towards these victims, but I can see that many of them will need help, and I hope that they will be able to get it. But other than that, I really can't say anything. Now then, who was next? The white shirt there, and then I promised you. Right, how are we doing for time? We haven't got, we're all right for time yet? Okay. Yes, the white shirt.
Thanks. It's Patrick Foster from the Daily Telegraph. Sorry, we're monopolising this.
The Daily Telegraph have done rather well. This is your second go.
Thanks very
Purely
much.
by chance.
Purely by chance. You mentioned in the report, and you mentioned again in your statement, that you set the bar for corporate responsibility at head of department level.
Yeah.
I wondered if you could give us a bit more information on how you came to set that level, and specifically, could you tell us, did you take any submissions from the BBC as to what the barrier, what level that should be set at?
Yes, I'll answer the second part of your question first, and the answer is no. The BBC made no submissions of any kind in relation to my report. The law doesn't help about this issue. In the criminal law, for a company to be held responsible and to have knowledge of what was going on, you have to show that the controlling mind of the company was aware of and could be convicted of the offence. If the company is going to be convicted of an offence. So that wasn't very much help to me, because I didn't think that it was reasonable to limit BBC knowledge to such a very high level of responsibility. That would have really been maybe the trust, not even the trust, executive board, and that would be far too narrow. I've had quite a lot of evidence about the BBC structure, the management structure, and it seemed to me that the lowest level of the structure at which you could say that somebody had management responsibility for a defined part of the BBC was head of department. A member of the head of department would be entitled to instigate an investigation, I think, whereas anybody lower than that would not be. A producer certainly wouldn't be. If a producer came to know of information, his or her duty would plainly be to report it to somebody more senior, but they wouldn't be able to do anything of their own motion. Similarly with an executive producer, similarly with an editor of a news program. And that was really why I came to that conclusion. I just had to make a judgment as to what I thought was reasonable and what I thought the public would think was reasonable. And there you are. That was my decision. Now, who was next? It really was you, wasn't it?
Thank you. Julian Drucker, 5 News. Dame Janet, you've said about the reluctance of some BBC staff to come forward. You've said there's an atmosphere of fear still exists today in the BBC. You've called it the culture of not complaining. That's extremely worrying, is it not?
Yes. I must point out that I saw the bulk of the BBC witnesses that I saw in 2013, some in 2014. And it saddened me that some of them were not prepared to speak unless they were guaranteed anonymity. And it was clear that they were concerned that there could be some form of disadvantage, detriment to them if they criticised the BBC. Since then, the Good Corporation has, well, the BBC has amended its whistleblowing policies and has, I think, genuinely taken on board the fact that their culture of not reporting is deeply detrimental. The Good Corporation has approved their policies, says that they've got a lot of work to do still to implement them properly. But I think, but the Good Corporation did find that an increasing number of people were saying that they did feel a degree of confidence. So I hope that there has been a little bit of movement since the time that I saw those witnesses. But I do stress that the report that Dinah Rose gave to the BBC called Respect at Work, she had exactly the same kind of report to her, attitude to her. People were not prepared to come and talk to her group, her panel, unless they were sure of anonymity. So that again was 2012, 2013. I hope there may have been a little bit of movement since then. I think there's a long way to go. Now, who did I promise? Who's got the microphone? I haven't done it properly. You're there with the red tie. You can have one. And you, all right, black jumper there. Okay, now then, red tie.
Mark Watts from Exero.
Oh, that's 2 goes you've had.
Like the Telegraph. You say in the report that DJ A7 told you that he was unaware of any complaint in relation to 15-year-old Claire McAlpine, and he also told you that he was not interviewed by either of 2 investigations conducted by the BBC. You make as a finding that these claims are untrue. Can you be explicit? Are you accusing DJ A7 of lying to you?
I'm not prepared to say whether I am or not. You must read the report and make of it what you wish. I had before me documents, contemporaneous documents from 1971, one relating to a conversation that took place between Bill Cotton and A7. The other, a conversation between Mr. Brian Neal, QC, as he then was, now the Right Honourable Sir Brian Neal, both of whom said that they had had conversations with A7. A7 told me that no such conversations had taken place and that this was not a lapse of memory on his part. They simply had not taken place, and I rejected that evidence. That's really all I can say. You must understand that the truth or falsity of the allegations that Mr. Cotton and Sir Brian were investigating was no part of my terms of reference, no part of my inquiry. What I was looking at is how did the BBC in those days deal with a complaint or a raising of a concern of a sexual nature, and particularly one involving a celebrity, as this one did. And you will see if you read chapter 9 of the report. You may not have had time to do that yet.
I've read both the draft and the final.
Of course you have. Yes. You will see if you read chapter 9 that I am deeply critical of the way in which the BBC conducted its investigation into those matters. That allegation was not properly investigated. A7 was asked about it, he denied it, and the book was closed. And that is not satisfactory for reasons which I explain in detail in my report.
And can you explain why
Is this your supplementary?
It is my supplementary.
Right.
Can you explain why you agreed with DJ A7 that you would not name him? Was there concern within your team of libel?
No. The reason that I agreed to anonymize him was the reason that I've just explained to you now. I was not concerned about the truth or falsity. His identity was not a matter of interest to me. My interest was the BBC had received a complaint about sexual impropriety by a celebrity. How did the BBC handle it? It didn't matter to me what his name was. It obviously would matter to him, and so it would only be reasonable that he would not agree to come unless he was accorded anonymity. I think that was perfectly fair and sensible.
Would it not have been of interest to your readers?
It might have been, but my interest is limited to matters which fall within my terms of reference. And that is, as far as I am concerned, all that the public is entitled to know from me.
Thank you.
The fact that they might be interested generally is nothing to the point.
Thank you, Dame Janet.
Now, who is next? You in the black jumper, I think, were promised. Has anybody? Yes, now I'll take this one and then one more. You at the back. Now, there are two hands that are overlapping. Two women sitting next to each other. I can't. You two, I don't know. You choose between you. And you're going to be the last. Now then.
Noel Titheridge, BBC. So is A7 right to say that you made no suggestion he was guilty of any misconduct whatsoever?
I did not make any such allegation. That is, as I've just explained, that was not within my terms of reference. I was interested in how did the BBC handle this complaint? And the answer was, I'm sorry, very badly. Yes, at the back.
Hi, it's Beth Rigby from The Times. Dame Janet, just in terms of the victims, Liz Dux, who's their lawyer, said around the leak that it beggared belief that no one in the management of the BBC would have known about what was going on. Do you accept that the victims might be disappointed today by your conclusions? And for the BBC, do you think that this report is a blow from which they can't recover reputationally?
Now, wait a minute. That's definitely two questions.
I'm
sorry. Which one do you want? Your Liz Dux question?
Liz Dux. The Liz Dux, then.
Right. In a sense, I have already answered this, you know, because I spoke earlier on about the need for evidence either of a direct nature or circumstantial evidence from which I can properly draw an inference. And I explained that I cannot draw an inference that the BBC knew at the level that I have explained to you. I think is necessary for me to say that the BBC knew, namely head of department level. I can't draw an inference that they knew from rumour. I'm sorry if the victims do not have confidence in my conclusions. I'm really sorry about that. I hope that the victims, well, some of them might be listening, some of them might be watching. I hope they'll hear what I say now, but I hope they'll also read the report. And then they, I hope, will understand why it is that I have reached the conclusions that I have. You simply cannot make that leap from people have heard rumours, ergo the BBC must have known. It simply doesn't work.
Can I just ask a supplementary question quickly? It's very quick. Just in terms of the lawyer, she also said that mandatory reporting laws should be introduced to insist that people do report the cover-up of abuse. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think it's a matter for the BBC, but I would expect it to be a rule of employment that people should report matters of concern of which they become aware. But I'm not in favour of the criminal law being invoked. I think that it's extremely difficult to know where to draw the lines between what should be an offence and what should not be an offence, and I don't think it's a good idea. I think what is really important is something that I was referring to just at the end of my presentation. It's really important that we get over to the younger generation, the potential victims at the present time, that they can report, that they should feel confidence to report. And the corollary of that is that the grown-ups who receive those complaints must treat them with respect, must listen to them sensibly and carefully, and must not blame them for anything that has happened. And if we can get that message over, that I think is much more valuable than having a criminal offence created that potentially sends people to prison for not reporting something. Let's get our priorities right. The priorities are to change the culture of being able to report and how reports are received. And if that message can go from this report, it will have been a worthwhile effort. I'm going to stop there. I must give way to Lord Hall. Thank you very much for your attention and for your courtesy, and good morning.
Well, you're watching Sky News, and this has been our top story this hour, the long-awaited report into Jimmy Savile's routine abuse of young children during his years working for the BBC that has been revealed.
Well, you just heard what Dame Janet Smith had to say. Her report says that the report made for sorry reading for the BBC. She went on to describe a culture of fear, which left celebrities, as she described them, virtually untouchable. But the report absolved the BBC corporately of any responsibility.
Well, a lawyer for the victims, Liz Dux, has called it an expensive whitewash. Well, amongst the key findings were that senior staff at the BBC and corporation were, as a whole, not aware of Savile's behaviour. Let's take you back across to central London, where the Director General of the BBC, Tony Hall, is giving his response to the report.
The organisation